IVM.
Journalism and the news industrial complex finds itself at a crucial crossroads. On one end, its narrative is being defined by what we share and consume in our own algorithmic bubbles. While on the other end of things, the very business model it stands on is being reshaped and redefined by the advent of digital. Add to that a world where opinions and points of view many times overshadow facts. So to dig into all of that and more, I have Faye D'souza on the show today to get her perspective on the state of journalism today, her career and journey so far, and crystal gaze into the future of the entire spectrum of things around it. But most importantly, to also understand what it means to be a journalist in today's world. I'm Varun. Be right back with Advertising is Dead.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Bradman is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Faye. Hi, Faye.
Hello. Is advertising dead?
Breaking news. It's been one of those conversations I've been meaning to have on the show, or rather my grandma was off and I said that sentence right now, is to actually have a chat with you on this, right? Because of all the people I follow in the space of journalism, you're one person who I've constantly looked at, okay, what does she put out there? I know I can kind of trust that. I know for a fact that what she's putting out is the kind of point of view I'd want to listen to. I'd actually want to start by asking you, why journalism?
Oh, okay.
Going back a little bit.
Actually, it's an interesting question because I've asked myself that question in, I think, 4 or 5 year intervals through the course of my career. I wanted to become a journalist, quite honestly, because when I was 17, 18 was when the Kargil war happened. And that was our first sort of exposure to war journalism. That was in Kargil. It was for young people, it was a really big deal. Yeah. Prannoy Roy was running a fantastic team. It was just like amazing. N. Ram was writing for newspapers. There were superheroes in journalism all over the country at that time. And it was and I never imagined actually doing television or, what is audio visual journalism. I was always in love with radio. And radio didn't have a news option. Still doesn't, unfortunately. Yeah. And I always imagined that I would either write for a magazine or work in print. So in my 12th standard, I studied, and in Bangalore, we call it pre-university. It's called PUC.
PUC,
It's technically college, right? So I studied statistics, maths, commerce, and accounts. Yes, I was, and I did pretty decently, actually. It was not bad. And there was this whole chart out. My mom wanted me to do a BCom and then do an MBA. And, I should have listened to her. And I'm like, damn. When you hit like that age where you realize your mother was right about everything. So I should have listened to her. But instead, what I did was I switched fields from my PUC to my graduation. And instead of applying for BCom, I applied for a BA, which was like shocking because you know how it is, not that the only people who do BAs are the ones who have no intention of making anything of their lives, the unambitious.
And that has been one of my biggest issues, right? Is like it's that whole like science, commerce, arts. It's that thought process of how we've always looked at education. Yeah. I'm an engineer, so I understand. I went that route, not forced. I didn't know what the options were.
Yeah, and I remember, doing a street play in college called Hum BA Hai To Kya Hua Dilwale Hai. It's entirely useless. But it was great because I went to a great college. I went to Mount Carmel in Bangalore. And it was the kind of place which challenged everything you thought you knew. We used to do soapboxes and we used to protest and we used to write, articles and we used to argue everything out. It was really a place which opened our mind to everything, and that's what I honestly believe that's what college should be. It should be a place where you challenge everything, which is unfortunately not where a lot of people see college or in our country right now. But I do honestly believe that it should be a hotbed of debate and protest. Yeah. And I decided at 18 to be a journalist. So then I did my BA in journalism and then I did an MA in mass communication and worked for All India Radio while I was doing my
master's. The radio thing happened.
Yes, the radio thing happened because there's only one place you can do news in radio, which is All India Radio, and they give you this like typed out news that comes from the head office, and you have to read it once an hour. But it was good fun. So yeah, my first love was always radio.
What actually was interesting for me as well, right, was the fact that I remember first watching you on Mirror Now, and I was like, okay, I've always heard of what news talking about the broader things. But what you were kind of talking about were citizen issues. And I never looked at it from that perspective, because for me, news is always something which I would try and find some parts of it which were interesting. Traditionally followed stuff which was... So I'm a huge politics junkie. I will follow every single election. I will look at every single number. I will try and understand which district, what demographic. For a person who hates maths, that has been one of my things which I've enjoyed the most, right? And what I actually found really interesting was that I think has continued with you. You always focused on what really affects people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that's an aspect of journalism sometimes which we forget, that we talk about broader things which obviously are for a wider set of people, but actually there are specific things that affect each and every person around us, and kind of bringing that to light?
So actually there are a couple of arguments for this, right? So, and I'll tell you how we arrived at that purpose.
Mm.
At the time that we launched Mirror Now, there was obviously it was a crowded market for an English channel, for a national channel. And we were like, okay, so what does this need to do? What does it need to be? And if you look at your newspaper, the traditional way the newspapers are designed, you have your front page, you have your city page, you have a state page, you have a national page, international, business and sports, and the editorial page, right? So what had happened in news television by that time is that everybody was looking at this sort of national political, looking at the country from inside of Delhi. So it was Delhi looking at India inside out instead of the other way around. And we actually ran some research that told us that the most of the conversations that were happening on prime time were about Pakistan. They were not about India. It was about this whole idea of the nationalist idea of what India was. And so that slogan sort of came up, saying "You first," where we said, let's look at it from a citizen's point of view. Because, while it's fair to argue the nationalist side, and there are enough people, so I'm not saying that that's something that shouldn't be done, but there are enough people already doing it. Yeah. At the end of the day, if the argument was, what comes into my house?
Yeah.
Mere ghar ke andar kya thi? So that was the yardstick we used to measure the stories. Right? So if, for example, the road outside your house is really bad, and in Bangalore at one point it was really bad, there were people and on two-wheelers dying because of the potholes in Bangalore, because they would fall and a truck would run over them.
Yeah.
And there was a series of these accidents. So that is a problem that comes into your house. Air pollution is a problem that comes into your house. Lack of safety, schooling, healthcare. These are problems that come into your house. Jobs. So we said, let's focus on these things. Because it had reached a point, in my opinion, where news was sort of disconnected from what was really happening in our lives. And it had become something you watch to distract yourself from your life. I was not actually speaking for you. And I remember, making this argument when we were pitching the channel, saying, you know what, and at that point it was true, if I'm going to spend 2.5 hours on the road trying to get home at the end of the day, and I come home and switch on my television channel and the news is talking about Pakistan, it's not helping my cause in any way. It's not bettering my life. It's not speaking for me. And I remember doing this campaign at one monsoon where every big city in India had at least a 1.5 hour, drive time gridlock everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is because nobody's speaking for this stuff. And the people who are in charge are getting away with it. And so we need to create a platform where we hold people accountable for these things. Because then we'll be able to improve at least some lives, which was the point with which we started.
What I find interesting also is I feel that I've heard some of these points come out in radio when I listen to private FM. And that's, I think, I don't know if there's a track there. Maybe it was the track from radio, audio, news, being kind of broader. But it makes sense, right? Because I remember seeing some of those, and that's when I actually started, around the times when I started following you. And I was like, okay, it makes sense because there are so many of these things, like just roads being bad or traffic being this way, or, when I used to read broader journalistic pieces, I would always see that, okay, there's a deeper investigation and insight into what's happening. Whereas what I ended up seeing a lot everywhere else was what I like to call breaking news journalism, which was never deep enough. Do you feel that at some point that digital is kind of helping bring that back, that you actually are getting a lot more investigative, are going a little deeper and also covering a wider gamut of things?
See, so newspapers never stopped doing that.
Yeah.
A lot of newspapers still ran, deep investigations. The bad boy of the market is television.
Yeah.
And I remember when I had started working at CNBC, I was part of a team that was doing a half-hour weekly on economic crime. And we had 12 people working on that show. It is an unthinkable luxury today to have 12 people working on one show. And it's because, basically, this is what has happened to television. It's an expensive prospect to run a television channel in India because of distribution, because of cost, because of the studios, the tech, all of this stuff, the manpower. You need multiples of 100 crore rupees to run a television channel, and there isn't too much money coming in at this point. Yeah. You know this since you started off saying advertising is dead, and that's the fundamental income. So what has happened over the years is that teams have thinned down. Can we do this? There are 6 people doing this. Can it be done with 3 people? Yeah. There are 8 people doing this. Can it be done with 4 people? So you've kept thinning down the teams, and as a result, you've eliminated anything that is labor intensive. So investigation, for example, real good investigation is labor intensive. You have to give a journalist months to just chase after something and then come back with the story. You can't. On the other hand, what you have is 5 reporters, 1 in every city. So that reporter has to go out onto field every day, stand in front of somebody's gate and say, this is a gate behind me. And stand there all day, because otherwise, how will you fill that 24/7 cycle, right? So every hour there is a bulletin, and that reporter spends their entire day standing in front of that gate. So they've actually not done any journalism at all, because they've not gone looking for information, they've not spoken to anybody, they've not built any sources, they've not built any sort of relationships, they've not vetted any of their information. How is that person even going to know what is behind the gate if they can never leave the post all day? So it's a combination of bad finances at this point, thinning teams, younger and younger people being put in charge. And there used to be a time when you had to work many years on the desk in order to be given an opportunity as a reporter. And even then you started really small, and you had to really earn your position inside the organization. And that's because you had plenty to choose from. There isn't plenty to choose from anymore. Because the best talent is not going to television. The best talent is going to the internet and to other forms of content. It's not television news anymore. So I think it's a combination of a bunch of these things. But there's great work happening, obviously, on tech play for news. There's great work still happening in newspapers, just not so much in TV.
It's interesting you mentioned digital, right? Because I was reading some time back about the New York Times and how the New York Times at a certain point of time, and everyone's spoken about how print is dwindled and died over the years, rather gone down primarily because of people aren't reading I haven't read a newspaper in physical form in years. I read it. I get my news. Yeah, I haven't. I have slowly moved away from no television. I have a Tata Sky connection. I don't use it half the time. I get a newspaper. I used to get a newspaper. It stopped at some point. I didn't even realize it stopped. But a lot of the publications I would follow, I still follow their news, but I just follow it online. Yeah. The New York Times was an interesting example of a print publication that went truly digital. Today has a great revenue model because it built it not on advertising, but built it on subscriptions and also on good content. So when you say young people are flocking to, or rather the best talent is flocking to digital, if you had to pick a few reasons why it's the right spot for a journalist to be today, what would your points be on that?
See, so the hamster wheel of television, I'm going to compare it to television because that's what I know. The hamster wheel of television doesn't exist on digital. So you don't have a 24/7 monster that you're constantly feeding. So that pressure is not on you. 1. 2, the costs are much, much lower. So you're not spending money as someone who runs a team now within digital news, you're not spending money on equipment. You're not spending money on cars, studios, lights, all of that stuff. I literally use the iPhone that is my, the phone that I use otherwise to do all my shows and to do all my shoots. So that then saves so much money that you're able to pay your team, you're able to do good work without having to worry about, the internet version of the TRP, which is your subs and your likes and your views. And I think that there is space, and because it's such a wide space, there's space for everyone. I don't imagine, there may be over a period of time some big giants that exist in this space, but I believe that we will have like many journalists doing independent work on various subjects, some really narrow and deep, some slightly wider. We're able to pick specializations and say, okay, this is what I want to focus on. This is the kind of work I want to do. I'm not required, like right now, I'm not required to cover everything.
Yeah.
I'm just going to cover what I think is important, and people who sort of see my point of view will consume that content.
Yeah.
If they want to cover everything, there are organizations that do that for you. So that way there's space as independent journalists to be your own boss without the pressure of competition. I mean, the fact that I don't have anxiety and acidity on Thursday mornings because this is when the BARC numbers are going to come out. And I remember I used to panic every Thursday saying, the numbers are going, I hate Thursday. It's just such a relief, because you're not a slave to the numbers. And that's so good, so good. And I believe that young people as audience members perhaps would be more willing to pay and to support. And whoever does pay and support, you still make enough money to survive, which is good.
You make an interesting point, right? It's about picking your own niche and kind of focusing on that and kind of build an audience who really wants that. If I go back to when I was studying mass comm, I remember that many of the people in my batch who were focusing on journalism, wanted to go be journalists in specific areas. There would be one set who would want to do lifestyle. Parts within that, but there is people who would want to do specific beats and specific areas and go deeper. And I remember someone who really wanted to go back to where he was from and say, I want to focus on telling the stories from there, because I feel we don't report enough about that. And I've seen a lot of them move away from that over the years.
Have they gone back though now?
No.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I guess later in this, I think the digital cycle came in a little later for many of them. And that also brings me to the point about CopCom, right? I think a lot of people who've done journalism move on to CopCom, and there are multiple reasons for that. But you also end up losing talent, so the talent's coming back.
So see, actually, this is something people don't realize about journalists, which is a grave injustice. Journalists have EMIs to pay and houses to run. We have friends in our age group who are doing really well, who have bought nice houses and are living in good places and can afford to send their children to nicer schools. People expect that journalists will be, the modern day financial Bhagat Singhs, which is basically give up all your comfort and give up, everything in order to do good work.
Yeah.
But at some point, people need to get paid. And when the pay doesn't come, or when you are working in an organization that's thinning teams and saying that someone with 2 years experience can do the work that you do, I don't hold it against people who decide to join CopCom, because CopCom pays really well in comparison to journalists.
Of course.
And so at some point you have to say, you know what, I picked this profession thinking I would change the world, but Shah Rukh Khan at one point said that you have to prosper before you can be a poet, or something to that effect, before you can become an artist. I think at some point that also matters. And it's only the really, these news anchors who break off and start their own channel within 6 months with funding from interesting people, and then manage to buy out those interesting people with funding that we don't know where it came from, who have enough, who have like crores and crores to their name. But mostly journalists are really underpaid. That's one thing. The other thing is I find that the really idealistic people who join the profession saying, I'm going to change the world, are the ones who sort of have their hearts broken first. And then they leave as well. And, so when I speak to journalism students now, and I get invited to talk at these colleges a lot, I keep telling them that you should pick your first job based on the editor you're going to work with or for. Yeah. Not the brand of paper or channel or whatever it is, because what happens is your first editor sort of sets the tone of the kind of journalist you're going to be.
Yeah.
There was this somebody said to me that the papers must fly. Like you must have someone who flings your work back in your face on a regular basis till you learn the beauty and the power of that work. And if you work for a bad editor, you get disillusioned very quickly. And you're absolutely right about the fact that I think journalism has lost more good talent in the last, say, 5 years than any other industry. Any other industry. So great, idealistic, wonderful, talented people have walked away.
Yeah.
And sometimes they would have liked to have stayed.
I think at some point people have to ask the questions like, is it worth it? I mean, is me pushing those ideals ahead even worth it? Because, I've actually thought about that a lot, because for a person who does not like to talk to people about politics openly, which is me, I have very strong opinions about things. Like I came on that discussion with you a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
I never said yes to anybody. I did it because I knew that you would not push it into some directions which would be unnecessary. And that's why I did it. And I feel that when people themselves are worried to say that, and I can say that I come from a point of privilege today. And if I'm worried to say that, a journalist as well worries about, okay, why do I need to go so deep? Why do I have to, obviously there's the money issue, but also I think secondly, there is this imbalance between facts and a point of view, which is not just an Indian problem. It's a global journalistic problem. Is that, do you state facts or do you state a point of view, or are those mutually exclusive?
So just to finish what you were saying, right? So I think that, and I had written a piece about this for the Spoken Fest earlier this year, about the fact that regular citizens in like well-to-do jobs or businesses living in nice houses are afraid to say anything today.
Yeah.
I mean, that should actually just make us stop and say, that is not normal, dude.
It's not.
It is not normal to have to think so many times. Yaar, please, yaar, mat yaar, please, maaf karo. There's something odd about that, right? And here you have an underpaid journalist whose job is to speak up. And let me be super honest about it. The trolling is brutal. It is horrible. And
I got trolled because I came on your discussion, by the way. That went on for a bit, and I was laughing at it because I was like, okay, this one I don't think I'll be trolled. And I used to, I would say, and you're right about the trolling, because a couple of years ago, about 3 odd years ago, I used to have a point of view. Then I just, your notifications are entirely people just trolling. And at some point, you're like, why am I doing it? Is it worth it? And sorry, I cut you off, but I mean, that's literally where the headspace goes.
No, but it's precisely. I mean, I ask myself that question, I think, once a week now. Like, why am I doing this? Because we've reached a point where I cannot find a news story to which people are not going to take offense in some way. And all I have done is written that story saying, ye hua. And, I make it a point not to put out my opinion. I just write it on Instagram saying, this happened today. Bus. Hindu hater, Muslim hater, this, that, something or the other. And I'm just like, after a point, I'm like, why am I doing this? There must be, let me call Varun. I'm sure he has a decent job for someone who can write. I could work for him.
Oh, you have to write for advertising.
Why not?
Yeah.
Chandler Bing could do it. No, but it's hard, yeah. And see, again, a lot of people don't understand. So it's your traditional newspaper. Think back. So you had all of those news pages, right? Of your city page, your sports page, city, national, science and technology, sports, something. Right in the middle, there would be the editorial page and the op-ed page. The editorial page is where the editor of the newspaper and the other editors of the newspaper, is always more than one, write their opinion and the stand that the paper is taking on issues. And the op-ed is where people write columns, and they're invited to write columns. They're qualified. So what television is, or should be ideally, is your whole day is your newspaper.
Yeah.
Prime time is your ed page, where the editor, which is why you have the editor of the channel who anchors prime time invariably.
Yeah.
And that person has the ability to put out a stand saying, this is how we feel about this issue. The people on that panel are meant to be the op-ed, who are invited because they're qualified to comment on something. Now, what has happened with the advent of social media and with the advent of certain types of television shows is that the op-ed is any ass off the street. Yeah. And social media basically means that everybody who has an opinion can just put it out there, irrespective of how undereducated that or informed that opinion is.
Yeah.
And so now it's difficult to tell. Now we're wading through this ocean of toxic opinions, and it's difficult to tell any quality from it. And I think what has also happened is that people like yourself, and I remember when Twitter first launched, right? It was this cool place where cool people exchanged ideas and talked about things. And I remember these long conversations that would happen because respond. And these conversations were fun for a third person to come and read because you felt like you learned something.
Yeah.
Now the loud, underinformed people have stormed the room and they're all yelling at each other. And people like you have backed up to the wall very quietly saying, I'm going to exist here so that I know what's going on in the world. I'm really not going to say anything because I want to get in that. So what's happened is I think that the toxicity of the conversation has caused the intelligent people to become very silent.
Yeah.
The unintelligent people to become louder. And so the quality of conversation in general around the world has dropped drastically. I mean, the discourse, there's no decorum to the discourse. Anybody say whatever they please, and it's happening everywhere. So I forgot why I was saying this. So journalists who are reporting are not meant to put out their opinion at all. And their opinion is they're supposed to keep their opinion out of what they're reporting. The only person who's allowed to put out an opinion is the editor of the paper or the channel or the magazine. The kind of journalism that I'm trying to figure out now in my sort of second avatar is pure information. So, there's actually a chart where we've broken it down saying the stuff we post on Instagram is just information and nothing else. Even if you want my opinion, I will not give it to you there. The conversations that we have, that I do on YouTube, the lives that we do on YouTube, we bring in domain experts.
Yeah.
So, and we ask them to share their expertise so that by the end of the conversation, you're better informed than when you went in. So, for example, if you're talking about a China-India problem in Ladakh, there is a defense angle, there is a diplomatic angle, there is an economic angle, there is a logistics angle. Right? So, we bring in a domain expert in each of these matters, and those people help us understand what is it like to move artillery to Ladakh in the winter. What is the temperature? You have to keep a jeep running through the night, otherwise it will freeze. The diesel freezes inside the jeep. So, stuff like this that you don't know. And you're like, I learned something new. And then we do interviews with people who have lived experience of certain issues.
Yeah.
So we talk to people from the LGBTQI community. We talk to people from the Dalit community. We talk to doctors. So that lived experience even domain experts don't have.
Yeah.
And then you can learn something new. So the idea now is to just weed out opinion altogether and just do information. And hopefully this should be like a new way to put out the news.
You have a bunch of things that I want to ask you about this, but I know we need to go in for a break. So we're just going to do that and be right back with Advertising is Dead.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to an awesome, amazing, incredible week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. Why aren't you? You should. It's absolutely essential that you do. It's IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Another fun week in the books last week, and I think you guys should definitely check out some of the shows that we did. So first, let me tell you about Cock and Bull. We did 2 Cock and Bulls on Cyrus Says last week, which is, I don't think we've ever done before. But there was just so much to talk about, and it was fun. The first one was just on Trish, myself, and Cyrus. The second one, we had Abhijit Ganguly on, and that was a great episode. Do check that out. Check out Know Your Kanun as well. It's been a while since I spoke about that show, but Amber's been doing a great job on it. This week he spoke to Naina Sharma, a Canadian lawyer, about the ways that you do business in Canada and the challenges that presents. Definitely very interesting stuff. Do check that out. The guys at Non-Curry are doing some really, really fun stuff. Do check out their latest episode. They talk about roti, the simple bread, but it's got some complications to it. Let them tell you about what they are. Do check that out. Also, do definitely check out the Wire Talks with Siddharth Bhatia. He's been killing it, man. It's just a new show, but what great conversations. This week, he had Siddharth Singh on to talk about pollution. Do check that out. And you know what, guys? The best news of all, Simplified is back. They've been back for a few weeks and I haven't called them out before, but remember that they're back and do check them out. This week, they talk about, does censorship make sense? Knowing the guys, I think I know the answer to that, but you should go check that out. And with that, let's go back to your show.
Welcome back to the show. We're still talking to Faye. I'm seeing the digital space, and there is a major flip, right? And you mentioned that in between what you're saying is that now anybody who wants to put something out and claim it's news can, especially on the internet. How do you make sure that what you're putting out stands out? Because it's an extremely crowded space because everybody thinks they're putting out news. I have seen, I have this weird habit where I notice, I'm not being shady, but I end up noticing what people are watching on their phones, and many times ask them, "What are you watching?" Right? And I've noticed this over the last 3-4 months because your circles of moving around your house or your building, etc. There are Zoom call conversations happening on relevant news topics, which are being shared on WhatsApp and on YouTube, which I don't think I don't think there's any form of news there. It's more conspiracy theories than it is actual news. So in that space, how do you make sure that what you're building, because what you're building is the right structure of things from my perspective. How do you make sure that stands out and still gets the right kind of audience and grows that, to even bringing in people who are watching those stupid Zoom conversations and bringing them into what is relevant facts? And
so, the people who are watching those Zoom conversations are perhaps the last sort of bastion of audience that we're going to approach. I believe, again, from what my first editors taught me, that the credibility comes with rigor, right? So it's about doing the job well, day after day, day after day, day after day, over years. It's like building a massive, for want of better, wall, where every day you put one brick. And you do it well on, over a period of time, your audience becomes more and more convinced. There's like, I know I can go here and this is what I will get. So there's a consistency, there's credibility that gets built. There's a sort of, and I believe that the internet is really, it's a place for authenticity, right? People like honest, so I like to be completely honest with our audience and say that, okay, this is what we were trying to do. This is what we wound up doing. And we'll have errors, we acknowledge our errors, we apologize for our errors, we explain. We're putting in checks and balances over a period of time to be able to add more credibility to the system. So one of the things that I want to do over a period of time is when we start our memberships is to create a monthly call with the editor for members who can then question, why did you do this story this way? Why did you pick this on that particular day? Why didn't you do it this way? Why did you do it that way? Because then there's accountability to the audience, which largely now journalism doesn't have. They're not accountable to anyone. I'm also going to bring in I've got a team of very senior journalists who were my bosses when I started, who've agreed to be sort of an editorial board of, so along with the board of directors, we'll create an editorial board, and they will be a quarterly sort of report submitted to them saying, these are the number of things we got wrong. These are the number of things we got right. This is what we're doing to remedy the mistakes and make sure that they don't happen again. So then there's accountability there as well. Yeah. Because, good journalism in a democracy only functions if it is, if it self-regulates. Yeah. And we have to be willing to self-regulate, and we have to be willing to provide that accountability. So that's the general aim. Yeah. And, it's a long, long, long road. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And over a period of time, we will assemble an audience of people who care about quality and who feel that, okay, I know that this is where I'm going to get it because I've got it now for the last 2 years or whatever from this one place.
If you had to kind of like put up broad strokes, like a couple of lines to say, okay, this is what kind of set out to build on digital. And these are the things that digital taught me and maybe tweaked some of those ideas that I had before I went pure digital. What would those be?
So a couple of things. So for example, I learned, and this is in style and form, I learned that for digital, you have to really roll back the performance. There's no need for a performance at all. So, and on television, there's a TV voice, and there's a TV stance, and you deliver your lines a certain way, and the internet doesn't need that at all. So, I had to sort of unlearn a lot of the things that we learned on TV and find a voice, find a tone that works. Like I said, the thing that I found is that there is a relationship between the audience and the users actually on the internet and the content creator, which is very personal and it's different from television. And it's very honest, and you share a lot more information than you would otherwise with your audience. And like I said, I think the biggest learning for me was authenticity, to just be as authentic as possible. So if I can't put something out for whatever reason, I just say so. If I've made a mistake, I just say, listen, sorry guys, I got this wrong, I'm sorry. And people understand and are very forgiving. And also I realized that it's quality over quantity, which is a really important thing to learn. That, again, when you are on TV and you're feeding that monster, it's about just put up. Whereas on the internet, I realized that, listen, if we don't have something good today, let's not do a show.
Yeah.
It's fine. We just put out a note saying, we don't have a show today. But we'll do something when we've got something right. So during the lockdown, my colleague Arun and I went out and we shot with the cops, we shot with the doctors, we shot in Dharavi. We took 4 or 5 weeks to turn around each of those stories, and we didn't put them out until we were really happy with them. We re-edited, revoiced, re-edited, shot again, went and met more people, got more sound bites, until we felt that, okay, now this is a good job. And we put it out for the love of the job.
Yeah.
More than anything else. The police story, although it didn't get the kind of views that I hoped for, it was just something that I had felt so strongly about, because we spent 5 weeks shooting that story, getting permission to shoot that story. And it's just, you just feel so good. And it's about just doing great work and, hoping that the audience sees it that way.
Someone recently asked me if there were 2 areas that I would be bullish about in terms of content, which people don't invest enough in today, but is really going to be for the future. For me, those 2 things were stuff around deeper news content and documentary or docu-series. They're actually the same thing, the way I see it, but I feel that's the most underserved content piece, especially from our country, which I feel the potential for that is so phenomenal. Because we don't tell real stories enough. We either tell really fictionalized versions of what we think is real, or we do I don't know, some parts of those are news, not entirely. I would say that's more trying to be entertainment, which comes on television, but I will not subscribe to that. And speaking of subscription, is subscription the model of the future for journalism?
It has to be, Varun, for more than one reason, right? And with due respect to the advertising industry. In television and in newspapers, what happens is, because the only source of income is advertising. And I can tell you for sure, and I think that, what I saw happening a year ago when I left has now happened in public for everybody to see, where advertisers don't give a damn about the quality of the content that you're putting out. They just fund, and I'm calling it fund on purpose, they fund the biggest 2 guys. So, which is why you have such a sort of nautanki that happens for TRPs, because there's no accountability for the kind of crap that they're putting out. They just want that one night's TRP because it gets them advertising. Yeah. Also, let's be honest about the fact, among the biggest advertisers on news specifically is the government. Yeah. Between, PSA ads, tender call-outs that they put on newspapers, plus ads that get put out and these large conclaves that get done before any government goes into election, this is a lot of money. And so the customer really for all of these news organizations is the advertiser, and the government is not the person who's consuming the news, which is why, and I keep using this analogy, if you are watching television news, it is very important to realize that you are to that news channel what chicken is to real good chicken.
Yeah.
Right? You are that commodity. Right? They've chopped you up and put you in a packet that serves their customer just right and sold you. You are the commodity. Your attention span is the commodity here. You are not the customer. So nobody cares what's good for you. Yeah. Nobody cares what's good for society. Nobody cares if this is divisive, misogynistic, anti-women, Islamophobic. They don't give a damn. There's no accountability. And the only way to change that is for the consumer or the user to take control. And the only way you can take control is if you pay for news.
Yeah.
If I am solely dependent on my audience paying me, I'm going to serve my audience's interest. Because the moment I start putting out crap, you will stop paying me. That's the only line of accountability. I'm not accountable to anybody else. And I actually think that consumers of news right now should be moving to subscription voluntarily with a vengeance, saying that, we don't want this crap free news that's coming into my house every day because I don't know what it serves. Yeah. Consider the fact that a lot of these channels are free to air. Who's paying for it? How is it free to air?
Yeah.
Right? How can you afford to do this? These are questions you have to ask, and you have to, at the end of the day, our parents tell us something really important, right? When you're coming home from school, they tell you not to accept free sweets from anyone. If you don't know what's in it, it's exactly like that. Do not take free news from anybody.
Yeah.
Pay for your news. Buy it from like a verified proper source.
Yeah, because if you realize who's giving them the money for them to be free, which means they're never going to say anything bad about those people.
Precisely. And this we should tell audience members. There are these conclaves that happen.
Oh my God.
These conclaves are only done for one reason. So that the sales team can make their quarterly numbers. Because each conclave spins for between 15 CR upwards, depending on the size of the conclave. The conclave only sells to advertisers if you've got a cabinet minister speaking in the morning and another cabinet minister speaking in the evening. And if you can get the prime minister, then nothing like it. You are set, you're golden. But if you ask the government uncomfortable questions, nobody will come to your damn conclave.
Yeah.
And you will not be able to spin any money. And your sales team will come back and say, why do we have this person in our network who's only causing trouble? Yeah. So that's how it works at the end of the day. The hand that is feeding these channels is purely the government and political parties. And you have to realize that. And a lot of people say, this anchor is sold out. But you have to understand what sold out means. Sold out means that this person has a channel with 200 people, 300 people working there. And in order to keep that channel viable, they have to do whatever the government tells them. Otherwise, either the channel will shut, or the anchor will lose their job, or the editor will lose their job. These are the options, really.
It's also precisely the reason why people like me who say, I have a P&L, I have people who work for me in a company. It's fear, right? It's not just fear, it's what you're responsible for a certain set of people. And I feel that deters you from saying things aloud. I was saying this to someone yesterday because we're recording this towards the end of, hopefully, whenever the end of the American election cycle is. And I was saying that what I appreciate, no matter my issues with America as a country, just because of a lot of the stuff that happens there, is that they are still they're still open and in terms of saying what they need to say. Whereas I remember that somebody tweeted out to Veerdas and they said that, welcome to the Daily Show with Veer. It's like, I'll have one episode and after that, whoever I speak about, whichever politician, whichever party, I'll end up, second one is going to be a podcast from jail.
No, but you know why that is, right? You know why that fear that you just talked about? Because our system is designed in such a way that government agencies have more discretionary powers over us than they do in America. So, for example, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And he runs it like corporate social responsibility, saying that, you know what, it's important for my country to have a good newspaper. Here is a bunch of money, go run your newspaper. He doesn't ask them any questions. Now, and that seems like a great idea because technically journalism should not be under pressure to make a profit for you. That's when you have all the problems that we're looking at right now. Technically, it should be run as a public service. What would happen if that same guy, or if a similar guy, if a businessman came to India, said, you know what, journalism should be a public service, here's a bunch of money, do the journalism that really needs to be done. There is enough discretionary power within various government agencies to trail the money back to this said businessman and shut down all his approvals. And, and have like income tax rate and some other rate and some other rate. And he'll be like, hey, meko nahi chahiye journalism, I have a business to run.
Yeah.
So what we have at the end of the day, we have technically everybody has a responsibility, right? Everybody has kids, everybody has house, everybody has business, everybody has something. Saurabh Bhaskar has movies that will get banned. Somebody else has, something else that will get banned. But and this is the question we have to keep asking ourselves, that if we decide that we're not going to say anything.
We're accomplices and we can't complain about what's happening around us then.
Then 20 years down the line, when your kids ask you, you tell them that, sorry, I couldn't do anything while your country was being squandered away. Yeah. Because that's what we're doing, we're squandering.
So in the middle of all of this, if I'm a young person wanting to be a journalist who still has, and thankfully I feel young people always have the right idealistic point of view and you try to make sure that stays. What should I know about what I'm getting into and what is not the right way, but what is the way what would you advise them on?
So I think it's great that young people have idealism. Also, I think historically all revolutions were driven by young people.
True.
I mean, including India's fight for independence. Yes, Gandhi was, well into his 70s, but he was being followed by, an army of young people across India. It was the young people who went out and took those risks and went to jail and stuff like that. I think that a young person considering journalism right now should know that it is hard. It is hard because we're currently at 142 out of 180 in the Freedom of Press Index in the world. Almost all of our neighbors in South Asia are better than us, including like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. I think that it's important to know that it's low paying. It's right now mentally extremely stressful. But you get the sense that you're doing something bigger than yourself, which is important, that you were able to make a difference. That, and I keep coming back to a couple of successes that we had, where we got the people of Mahol, who were living in Mahol in this toxic place, moved out. It took us 3 years, and it actually happened after I left television. But it just gave me the sense, and I still get calls from those people saying, because you took up the story, today our lives have been saved. We got the government of India to ban child lock in taxis all over the country, saving lives of women. We got the government of India to remove tax on sanitary pads, remove GST on sanitary pads. I mean, stuff like this. You get to do that, which I don't know how many other professions allow you to do, where you can. And the best part about journalism is that your name is on your work for all to see, which leads to the trolling. But in the meantime, nobody can take it away from you. Everything that you do has your name on it. And that's pretty special, compared to other sectors. Maybe you'll spend 6 months working on a presentation and someone else will walk away with it. Here, whatever you do is yours. You've got your name on it. If it's good or it's bad, it's yours at the end of the day, which is kind of cool.
Towards the end of every episode, I do this one segment because kind of taking it to, as we wind it down, it's called the humans of advertising. It's my attempt at trying to make ending off on a lighter note as we end off on most of these things. What are you a huge consumer of, or a fan of, that people will be surprised that you consume so much of what X, Y, and Z? What is your obsession that people will be surprised? Like, really, you're into that? Like, what would that be?
Comic books. Marvel, DC comic books. Actually, all comic books. I'm a huge Peanut fan. I'm a huge Tintin fan. I'm a huge Asterix fan. I drink a lot of black tea, which I think a lot of people know.
Powerpuff Girls up there.
Powerpuff Girls. So I love cartoons and comics and superheroes and that sort of thing, which I don't know how many people know. I wind up buying more books than I can read, and almost every flat surface in my house is books stacked one on top of the other, and I keep telling myself I have to get through this and I have to finish reading it. I have more sneakers than any one person needs to own, which is really disappointing.
All of us.
Yeah. No, so and it's a funny story. Not exactly a funny story, but when I used to wear heels to work. I used to dress formally and I used to wear heels to work. And then a couple of years ago, our studio in Kamala Mills was ruined because of the fire that happened, right? And we had to overnight fly out to Delhi and function out of Delhi for 3 months. And I had taken one pair of sneakers with me, and it was the Delhi winter. And I just lived in those sneakers. And then I came back to Mumbai after that, and I was like, I'm never wearing heels again. And then after that, I just got out and just kept buying sneakers. So I have sneakers in every color and every design.
Perfect.
Yes.
Anything you've read or watched recently that you'd recommend, or even listen to if it's a podcast?
So I read everything that Maya Angelou has written recently in the lockdown. I strongly recommend it to everyone, especially the girls. It really it fills your soul in a way that nothing else can. Read a lot of Ambedkar. If you can't read Ambedkar because it's too technical, there's a great Ambedkar film on YouTube. You can watch it in Hindi or in English or in a couple of South Indian languages as well. It's really nice. You should watch that film. I think that it also sort of clears up the cobwebs of who we are and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Ooh, I saw something on Mrs. America.
I was meaning to watch it.
It's really good. It's I wound up chaining it and watching it over the course of 2 days. Again, as you can see, I consume a lot of feminist and activist content. So, but it's really that show is really, really, really cool. It's really nice. I highly recommend it.
I saw the trailer and I was like, this is interesting because some of these stories you don't know about, and it's really interesting to kind of watch them.
And it's also an interesting sort of this thing into how America got divided between the conservatives and the liberals and what they mean by conservatives and liberals, which is technically the answer to like 3 questions. Depending on what your answer is, you get slaughtered. So,
I saw the Chicago 7 recently, and I think that was so good, like so good.
And so pertinent, not to where we are right now. Yeah, so pertinent.
I actually went back and read about each and every one of them and what happened to them, and it's interesting to kind of do that because you realize where they all ended up. Great to kind of look at, and if a movie makes you go and do that, and I'm a huge Aaron Sorkin fan, so for me it was like I had to like dig deeper.
No, but this is also the kind of content you were talking about earlier, right? Storytelling, but almost real to life storytelling, which makes people then go read up about stuff, ask questions, sort of understand new concepts a little better, which is kind of cool.
And it's also the right kind of dramatization. It's not over dramatization. It is,
But it's not documentary either. Yeah. You're right.
What can you put together in an instant?
Roast chicken.
Really? And my final question generally is, why will advertising not die? But I'm going to ask you, why will journalism not die?
Because we can't afford it. Because in order for a democracy to function, you have to have viable press. And so if we want to be a democracy, we have to now literally form a human chain around journalism and protect it, because that's the only way for the democracy to survive. It's not a choice. And journalism will survive because there are great journalists in our country putting their lives and families' lives at risk on a daily basis for zero to no money and doing their job. And because of them, it will survive.
Thank you so much for doing this. This has been awesome. Like all I had hoped it would be and more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I feel like we didn't say enough funny things.
That doesn't have to be funny. The whole point of this is, as long as it is enough things, and in my style of not talking in a straight line, I go through a zigzag maze of sorts in the way I drive conversations, and as long as that doesn't bother anybody, this is perfect.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills. From health to relationships. From mental well-being to emotional well-being. And of course, your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi guys, this is Ayushi.
And I am Ritasha.
And welcome to Agla Station Adulthood.
It's a fun podcast we've got going on, and we'd love for you to tune in and enjoy with us.
Join us as we stop at various stations and discuss different topics that seem to be bothering us, and hopefully
Dating,
you as well.
relationships, beauty, just being an adult, lots of different things.
We don't have a great grip on it, but we've done okay so far.
Catch Agla Station Adulthood every Thursday on the IVM app, the IVM website, or wherever else you get your podcast.